Cool. All right. I think we'll get started now. Our first speaker is our keynote speaker, sitting right here in front of me. His name is Carlos Arguelles. I don't know if how many of you not know him, because he's, I think, one of the celebrity of quality engineering world. He has been with quality since 27 plus years now. He's been with Microsoft, Google, Amazon. So I feel like a lot of the quality practices that has happened in the last 3 decades, Carlos has a lot of contribution to most of those in the world of quality. If you don't follow him on LinkedIn, please do that. I was just thinking that this contest, in case Carlos posts, he might be a clear winner of it. So yeah, with that, I'll let Carlos get started. Thank you, Carlos, for being here.
Thank you. Testing. Does this work? Yep. It does? Cool. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. My name is Carlos. I'm super stoked to be opening things up today for InnovateQA 2025. And I wanted to talk about the evolution of the testing roles. And before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about me and why this is something that matters to me. I started my career at Microsoft in 1997 as an SDET. I was an SDET for a long time. I was a test lead for a while. I was an SDET again. I was at Microsoft for about 12 years. Then I went over to Amazon, also as an SDET. I was there for 12 years. I had a short stint as a manager, but for the most part, I was an IC. So I've been involved in testing for a very long time. And then in 2020, I went over to Google, also in engineering productivity. I was the technical lead for infrastructure for integration testing for the company. Chaitali was my hiring manager. She's right here today, and she's awesome. She's an amazing mentor, so make sure you talk to her today. And then in 2024, I decided to come back to Amazon, and I've been in the Amazon worldwide stores for a little bit now. I'm a senior principal engineer these days, but testing is something that I've always been passionate about. It's something that's always been a part of my life. And so I thought I'd spend this morning telling you a little bit about what I've seen be the evolution of testing throughout my career. And I wanted to start with a provocative question, which is, are we in trouble? And you almost have to have a hook to get people excited because it's early, right? Like, I want to make sure you're awake. And the reason I ask this question is because there's a few kind of signals around there that we might be in trouble. There's 4. The first one is if you look at the dev test ratios over time, like 30 years ago, there was a 1-to-1 dev test ratio, and then they kind of shifted to 10-to-1, and these days they're about 100-to-1 in these big companies. So looking at that trend, you might be thinking, are we in trouble? Is this a dying breed to be a test engineer of sorts? Reason number 2 is that a few years back, companies like Google eliminated the SETI role, and Microsoft eliminated the SDET role. So that certainly sent a bit of a signal to a lot of us, and we started wondering the same thing. Are we in trouble? Are we a dying breed? Because if these big companies are getting rid of this title, then do they appreciate it? I don't know. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is, the sad reality today is that there's been a lot of layoffs in the last 3 years or so, and a lot of those have disproportionately affected people in testing roles. And so again, that creates a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the future of testing. And the last one, of course, this is 2025. You got to mention Gen AI. Gen AI is changing the world. It's doing that very quickly. And it's natural for all of us to be wondering, is it going to do my job? Right? And so you put those 4 things together, and it's not unusual that you might be thinking, are we in trouble? And so my answer is no, but with a caveat. So that's why I put a little asterisk there. And you're going to have to listen to me for the next 30 minutes or so to figure out what the caveat is. But hang in there. The way that I want to explain this to you is through an evolution. Because I think the best way to understand the future is to understand the past of something. And I'll walk you through my own life and the things that I saw throughout that time. And the first part of that is when I was in college, I really had no idea what testing was. I had no interest in testing. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know I needed to do it. I just wanted to write code. I started writing code when I was like 10. I just did it for fun. tested in high school. Then I went to college. It's probably too small. Maybe the people in the front row can see. What do you think those two languages are? Pascal, very good. What about the one in black? That's hard to see. It's COBOL. It's like the languages I studied in college are completely useless today. Pascal and COBOL is what I did my undergrad in. And so when I was in college, my professors taught me how to write code, but they didn't teach me how to test code. And the only extent to which I thought about testing was, I got to get a good grade in this class, so I'm just going to test it enough to make sure I don't fail this class. And so that was kind of like the first part of testing for me. But then let's talk about the next part, which is when I graduated from college in '97, I got a real job. And my first real job was at Microsoft. I shipped Office '97, and then Office 2000 was the first kind of thing that I tested from beginning to end. And what was really interesting about Office 2000 is that it was a thing that we certified the final binaries and would put them on a share, and then manufacturer went and burned millions of copies of those CDs and physically mailed those millions of copies all over the world. So if you had a bug, that was bad. You were never going to fix that bug, ever. It was going to live on your customers' hard drives for the rest of your life. And so getting this right really mattered. This is why Microsoft at the time had a 1-to-1 dev test ratio. And that brought interesting dynamics to the table. I basically had one dev that came he was a night owl, so he would write code until 2 a.m. and he'd stroll in, work at 11 o'clock, and grab a cup of coffee and grab me, and he'd tell me, this is what I wrote last night. I want you to test this. Like, cool, I'll do that. And that was kind of it. It was pretty informal. What that brought, at the time, kind of thinking back, is there was a bit of a wall of confusion. He would throw crap over the wall, and I would test it, and I would throw crap over the wall. Sometimes the code that I got didn't even compile. Sometimes the code I got compiled but didn't even work. I'd just throw it back over the wall and be like, dude, fix your stuff. And same thing for bugs. I would just kind of throw them back and forth over the wall. And so this created this wall of confusion that was not great dynamics. And the other thing that happened here is that it was very difficult to grow in your career as a test engineer because I couldn't really be thinking long term. My job was literally like, what did my dev do yesterday? I'm going to test it today. Tomorrow I'm going to test what my dev does today. And so there was no real chance for me to be thinking about what does the world look like 6 months from now, a year from now. There was no chance for me to really be thinking about how does this feature fit within the entirety of the product. It was very difficult because my scope was pretty limited. And so, in retrospect, it was not a great situation. Here's the second part of the evolution, is in 2009, after 12 years at Microsoft, I left. And I joined Amazon. And so when I joined Amazon, the thing that was clear to me was that the dev test ratio was very, very different. It was a 10-to-1 dev test ratio, roughly. And the things I tested back in those days were things like very, very early versions of RDS, like the very first version of AWS RDS. I tested the very first version of Elastic Load Balancing, EC2 Autoscaling. Those are all features that were like brand new in 2009. And also the Amazon.com retail site. Now, what is different about this is that these are web services. And so the cool thing about web services is that you own the code. So if you have a bug, hopefully you have some telemetry, some dashboards, some alarms. You get paged. You look at it, you roll back, you go fix your bug, and then you go fix it. And so you own the code, you have the ability to fix things in a way that you didn't with software that you were burning to DVDs or CDs and mailing them. And so I think that's why you could have a 10-to-1 dev test ratio, because you could be a lot more iterative about the kind of things that you did. Now, this really meant that I was a tester that was embedded in a team of devs. And so this is a very different dynamic, because all of a sudden I could influence 10 devs around me instead of just one dev around me. And a couple of things that happened is the wall of confusion didn't exactly go away, but it went from being a 6-foot brick wall to maybe being like a 3-foot little fence. There was a lot more talking between my developers and myself. We were in the same team. We were cooperating and partnering on owning the quality of the software. And then also, for my career in particular, it made a huge difference because all of a sudden I was able to impact and influence a lot more people around me, and I was thinking much more holistically about the product. And so the mind shift that happened here was I went from thinking I do the testing to thinking, well, I help you do the testing. We partner in this together. We both own quality of this product. And so point is, there was an inflection point in the industry, and that forced my mindset to change from doing this thing to doing the same. So I was an SDET, both at Microsoft and at Amazon, but the way that I thought about the world and the kinds of things that I did were very, very different. So we'll continue this path. My time at Amazon, I was there for 2009 through 2020. And I saw the dev test ratio really change from 10 to 1 to about 100 to 1. And that actually holds true for most of the industry. Why? I don't think it was a deliberate effort from anybody in leadership saying we should change the ratios. I think number one, we hired devs at just a simpler, faster rate than we hired test engineers. Amazon went from being 3,000 engineers to being 60,000 engineers in that time frame. So pretty crazy growth, and we just couldn't hire folks in the test world as much as easily as we could devs. And I think the other thing that happened, though, is that these roles were perceived for a very long time as having a glass ceiling. Like you couldn't possibly grow to become a principal engineer or let alone a senior principal engineer if you're in these roles. And that's not unfounded because we didn't have anybody in that role at that level at Amazon. And so I think what happened is a lot of people decided, I want to grow in my career. I don't see a way to grow in this role. I'm going to become a dev. I'm going to become manager. Those are more clear paths for growing in my career. I stayed in the role. I stayed in SDET. And I think because I was stubborn and I was kind of more excited about following the untraveled path. And in fact, when I was up for promotion to principal in 2014, there were no principal SDETs. So my boss and her boss had no idea what to do with me. They were like, we think he's principal, but we don't know. Here's the doc. And but the nice thing is that when you are following a path that nobody's traveled before, is that you can make your own adventure. You can choose your own adventure here. And so that was, in retrospect, it was pretty fun to do. And the thing that it did is it showed that Amazon and Google and all these big companies, they really do value these roles that are centered around engineering and operational excellency. And today, for example, there's 13 principal SDETs and 4 principal QAEs at Amazon, so that's like an entirely different world. I worked at Google. There was lots of L7 engineers in engineering productivity. These companies do value this. It just took a while for us to show the world that there is no class ceiling here. But we lost a lot of people along the way. In this world of 100 to 1 dev test, it became even more important for you to be a force multiplier, to be thinking about, I can't do the work. I have to help others do the work. And so the mind shift that happened here with this inflection point was thinking, in the old world, my thought process was, I help you do the work. But in this new world, my thought process and my mindset was, I can't even do that work. I'm going to write tools to empower you to do the work. And so, again, there was an inflection point, and my job was different. My job changed from being one thing to being another thing, even though I was always called an SDET. But I had to evolve along the lines of what the new world was bringing. And so this takes me to tomorrow. And as you can probably guess by now, my takeaway today, if you're going to take anything away from me today, is that there is an inflection point that we have today. Your job tomorrow is going to be very different than your job yesterday. And you have to evolve with it. And so that's my caveat to the earlier question of, are we in trouble? So what are the kinds of things that are important in this new mind shift? So the first one is, I talked about force multiplication, but I really want to double down on that And so to pick an example, you can do the testing, and that is an activity that is not super high leverage because you are a team of one. Or you can think about higher leverage ways of impacting people. So instead of doing the testing, you are creating a test plan or test principles or test best practices that other people follow. And so that's a higher leverage activity because you're now able to impact and influence more people than you were before. But you should continue thinking about higher and higher leverage activities because there's less of us trying to do more work. And so maybe you are auditing and improving test plans that other people are creating for other people to execute. So this is a higher leverage activity. And so at any given point, you want to be thinking, what are the activities that I'm working on? What is the leverage point of these activities? Here's another example. Teaching. Teaching is a great activity. It's a highly leveraged activity to begin with because I create something, I have some knowledge, I create a class, and I teach a bunch of people. By definition, it's higher leveraged. But you can even be thinking higher leverage than that because you can create a class and you can teach other people to teach your class. And so the point is, you always want to be thinking about whatever it is that I'm doing now, how do I take it to the next level? How do I scale it further than what it is today? And so look for activities. You're not always going to be doing something that's high leverage. Sometimes you're doing something that's not, and that's fine. So at any given point, your work is going to be a blend of things that have different levels of leverage. Now, the other thing is Amazon has this concept of a flywheel. We talk about flywheels a lot. And a flywheel is basically a wheel that has a weight on it. And the idea of the weight is that the first time that you spin the wheel, it's a little harder to spin it because it has a weight. But then that weight, as it does its first turn, it accumulates momentum. And so the second turn becomes easier, and the third turn and the fourth turn. It's like every single turn of the wheel, it just becomes easier and easier to turn the wheel because it has this concept of a flywheel. And so look for activities where you can sacrifice some short-term gain to be in a much better place long-term. And that's 1,000 of things that we do in the test world, essentially that. You have to convince your engineers to write more tests today so that you're in a better place tomorrow. So this sort of flywheel situations are super important for us to identify and to have the certainty and the conviction that we need to sacrifice some short term to be in a better place long term. And so the mind shift here is for us combined to be thinking bigger about the space, to be thinking beyond just testing, the word testing, which is very dear and near to my heart, but really what we're doing is we're influencing the way people do engineering excellency, we're influencing the way that people do operational excellency, and we're influencing the way that builders' productivity evolves over time. And so kind of in the old mindset, we, for the most part, stayed in the testing world, in the outer loop of the software development experience, where somebody would check out a piece of code, we test it. And what I encourage you to do is to think about this is your entire job. The things that we're doing in the space can impact the way people build code, test code in the inner loop, the way that people do in the outer loop, the way we deploy, the way we release, the way we monitor. Like, this is your space. You have the right skills to impact the entirety of the software developer experience. And so that's my plea to you in this new level. And of course, 2025, we have to talk about Gen AI because it's the big elephant in the room. Every single one of you is wondering if it's going to do your job. I am too. And I think here, I see people that are either like super gung-ho on Gen AI is the solution to every problem in the world, and I see people that are absolute skeptics. I tend to be a very, very pragmatic dude and think about, like, here's the technology that can help me do a better job. I'm going to use it, but I'm going to use it understanding the limitations of it. So I'm going to give you an example. LLMs are incredibly smart testing and incredibly smart testing end-to-end UIs. They're so much better testing than they are writing code. And we're not really talking about this. We're talking about Gen AI for writing code and vibe coding and all these things. But like, they are so crazy smart for testing. And so I'm going to walk you through an example. I just wrote a test, and my test said, go to Amazon, search for Harry Potter book, make sure the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is in the results, add it to the cart, make sure the cart has that in there. Pretty simple test. In the old world, I would have written it in, I don't know, Espresso, Selenium, whatever, some sort of UI framework, but I just gave it to an LLM. That's it. And what I wanted to know here is not only what did the LLM do, but how does it think? So you got to be looking at the reasoning part that comes out of an LLM to really understand the way these things work. So I'm going to walk you through the example. And so we start by sending the screenshot of the page to the LLM, and the LLM says, this kind of small print, so I'll read it. This is the reasoning that comes from the LLM. This is the exact reasoning. It didn't change it. This is literally what comes out of the LLM. It says, well, looking at the current state, we're at the home page, I need to search for this book. The first step would be to use the search bar at the top of the page and figure all this stuff out. This is great. This is cool. And so it sends the command that what it wants me to do is type text, Harry Potter in this XY coordinate. And so this is going to go back and forth where we sent the screenshot to the LLM, and the LLM says, here's the thing that you should do next, and we do it. It's usually clicking somewhere. And then we send the next screenshot back and forth like that. And so we type Harry Potter, and then it says, cool. Now that we have typed Harry Potter, we need to execute the search. I can see there's a search button, magnifying glass icon next to the search button. So you had to click on that. So I figured out that this search button was that. And so it says, got to click on this XY coordinate, which is the search button. And there it is, Harry Potter. And then we get to a verify step. So the LLM has been told to make sure that this search is there. So it says, you can see Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is in the results, which is exactly what we're looking for. The first item. So the LLM is happy and says, looking good. And then it tells me you should click on this XY coordinate to add it to the cart or to go to the detail page of it. Now, this is just amusing. Part of the reasoning, it says, you should click on this because it appears to be the most economical option at $7.14. So the LLM is actually trying to save me money, which is just amusing to me. And so it's like, cool, thanks for saving me, whatever money that is. And here's where things start going south, because you knew they had to go south, right? There's no add to cart button in that screenshot. It's actually below the fold. And so the LLM takes a decent guess at it. He says, well, there's an add Prime to get fast delivery button, so I'm going to click on that. That probably adds it to the cart. It's wrong, but it's not a terrible guess, right? And so it does that. It adds Prime, and then nothing happens. So the LLM is like, well, that didn't work, and it undoes it. This is cool. The amount of reasoning that's happening here is absolutely fascinating to me. And it says, well, the screenshot doesn't actually show the full page. I figured that out. So we should probably scroll down to find the add to cart button. That's super cool. This is not any secret sauce. This is just a plain old LLM with very little training. So we scroll down. So it sends the message scroll down, and there's the add to cart button. Now our little robot is happy. It says, cool, found it. And we should click on this button. So there's the XY coordinate of that. I noticed through all of this, like a lot of the automation that we wrote in the past was going through the DOM, and it was trying to find specific things by ID, and every time those IDs changed, automation broke. Every time that an unexpected message box pops up, your automation broke. LLM doesn't care. It's literally going through the UI like a customer would, and it's literally just clicking on things like a real customer would. Okay, we're at a verify step now. It says, hey, I can see the book has been successfully added to the cart. That looks good. But what's really interesting to me here is that it verifies it in many ways. It says, number one, the cart subtotal shows 714. So it actually remembered that the book was 714. And when it added it to the cart, it made sure that the price on the card was $7.14. Also, there's an added to cart confirmation message visible there. So that's cool. And then, oh, by the way, the cart icon shows one item. So that's a third way that is verifying this. And then also, the Harry Potter book is visible in the cart preview. So what's really fascinating to me is that the LLM was smart enough to verify not one, but 4 different ways that this thing was working. Which, to be honest with you, if I was writing this test, I'm not sure I would have had that foresight of like verifying in 4 different places. This is all just a plain old LLM, again, just reasoning through this world like a human. And so, to me, like, this is amazing. Like, we have to embrace this technology, and we have to embrace it today, not tomorrow. And we have to use it to help our lives be better. And we shouldn't be scared of it. I actually picked this up. It's an ad, you probably can't see in the back, but it's an ad from IBM from 1951. So it's almost 75-year-old ad. And it says, an IBM speeds through thousands of intricate computations. It can replace 150 engineers. And no longer must valuable engineering personnel, now in critical shortage, spend priceless creative time at routine repetitive figuring. How timeless is that? That's 75 years old. And it was supposed to replace 150 engineers. It actually created a lot more work for engineers. Like, we're still all here, right? So clearly it didn't replace us all. So I think this is kind of an analogy of what we're looking at today, where yes, it's going to do your job, 100%. But it's going to enable you to do different things and more interesting things with your time. I'm excited about, like, there's a really cool white paper on how some data scientists at Amazon are creating different personalities of LLMs. Each LLM is, or each agent is a different personality, and we're sending them at the Amazon store as different shopping agents. So you have, like, you know, Jane the cat lady trying to, you know, be cost conscious and look for, you know, toothpaste or something. And we create all these different personalities and we send them at the Amazon store, and we're getting really fascinating answers. This is sort of stuff that we couldn't do in the past, to create personalities. And so what I hope I did today was take you on this journey from despair and fear and uncertainty and doubt at the beginning of, you know, like, are we in trouble? And hopefully convinced you that we're not, and that this is actually a really exciting time to be here. And I'll leave you with this thought, where we will always need engineers that care about engineering and operational excellency and developer productivity. These are things that you know better than most everybody else around you. And we're always going to need that, whether your title is QAE, SDET, SDE, SWE, whatever it is. You may not have that title tomorrow, but the kind of work that you do and the domain expertise that you bring to the table, that's timeless. That was needed 30 years ago when I started my career. That's needed today. That will be needed tomorrow, whether we have LLMs or not. So that's your superpower. Use that. That is what makes you different from every other one of the hundreds of thousands of software engineers out there. But we have to evolve. Your job tomorrow, again, is not going to be the same as your job today. That's been the case, as hopefully I've shown you many times throughout the last 30 years. It will continue to be that. I think it's super important for engineers to be resilient and understand that you have to evolve with time and with needs. Embrace that change. I'm personally super stoked about that, and I think it's going to be great. So if you like the talk, there's the survey. If you didn't like it, maybe don't click on survey. But yeah, we've got some time, I think. So if 5 minutes? Awesome. So if you guys want to ask any questions, I wanted to make sure I saved some time for questions. Yeah.
Is there a mic, or do we see out?
I don't know. I will repeat your question if we don't have one. Oh, okay, cool.
So this is more on the AI side of things, which versus the rules. But so AI right now seems very useful in 2 kind of possible components. One is code gen, and one is like the agentic component. I'm curious your perspective on how close are we from that being like novelty example use cases versus like full scale suites? Are we crossed that threshold already from what you're seeing, or are we still like 6 months or a year? I mean, obviously timelines right now in AI seem to be all over the place, but can you sort of share that threshold of novelty to usefulness in the practical world?
That's a great question. I think we've gone past that threshold. We use it for a lot. We use it for generating code. We use it for testing code. The thing I just showed, we run hundreds of thousands of UI tests on the Amazon store with LLMs today. They're absolutely critical for us to ship the Amazon store. We use LLMs for summarizing documents all the time. We use them for writing documents. I wrote a one-paragraph rant on something, and I fit it to an LLM, and I said, write a one-pager on this, because I don't have time to write that one-pager. And it did, and I sent it to a bunch of people, and that's kind of lazy, but I wanted to spark some debate on something, and I didn't have enough time. And so it literally took me 2 minutes to do, and it was pretty good. So we use it, code generation, testing, document understanding. I have a work log of everything I do, because I'm old and I forget things. And so I often find myself wondering, I was talking to somebody about this like a couple weeks ago, and who was it? And I literally have this work log, and I have an LLM plugged into it. And I'm like, who was it that I was talking about this? And it's crazy accurate on that sort of thing. I was joking about this. I asked it to write my review, and then I sent it to my boss. And it was actually a pretty good review. Like, the first one was like pandering. It's like, you're doing an amazing job. And I was like, no, be stricter. And it was like, you're doing a terrible job. It's like, okay, so like, be balanced and fair. And so like, I think we have to embrace it. But with understanding that it's not 100% there yet, but it's changing so quickly that we have to take a stance on it. Question over there. Sorry, we're going to have to make you run.
Yeah, no problem.
The Harry Potter example you gave, that LLM test you're doing on Storefront,
Did that replace UI testing you were doing before? Did you add it on to the existing testing you were doing? Like, how does that fit in?
Yeah. It's not replacing humans. Honestly, like the amount of testing, and this is true for every place where I've ever worked, the amount of testing that we should be doing versus the amount of testing we actually do, there's a major disparity between those two. So it didn't replace anybody. But let me just say, just so that we're clear, because we talk about non-determinism for LLMs all the time, humans are terrible at determinism. Like, if you look at the medical field where humans are making life-death decisions, our rate is 5%. That's our error rate in medicine, is 5%. So we're not that great. If you've ever taken a Waymo, they're amazing. Like, I absolutely trust that car to drive me, and it does a much better job. So the point is, like, all these things that we do manually on a repetitive basis are absolutely automatable. What I want my test engineers to do is I want them to be exploring and using their creativity to explore new things, not executing the same thing over and over again. That I want an LLM to do. That's going to free them up to do the more interesting things. Right there.
Kind of related question. Based on the same example that you were giving for the test case, I was thinking that what is your take on how easy it's going to be for the AI to be able to generate the intention of the test case? Like, there is one test case that you basically define for the AI, but that's not really what we do. We have to define what is the human intent on using that web page, and we have to define a scope. We have to decide what is convenient or what we need to test for that particular page, and what is just regression testing because it's something new versus something already there. So, what's your take? Is it going to be something that the AI can do soon or not?
Yeah, and there's various parts to this. So, like, there's a lot of experiments with, given the spec of a product, can we generate tests for that spec? Given tests, can we use an LLM to execute those tests? There's a lot of, given code, can you understand that code and generate a spec so we can generate tests from it? We're debating whether we should be generating tests and then generating the code from tests, or we should be generating code and then the test from the code. Like, it's an interesting time because we don't know what the hell we're doing. And so we're experimenting in all these different ways, and some work and some don't, and some work better than others. So again, I think this is why it's important for all of us to embrace this and jump on this today, because there's a very limited time frame to really shape that world. I think there would.
So how do you see yourself or quality assurance for next 5 years with AI coming in? Would we always still be in engineers, or would that change into a new generation of this AI kind of? I hear a lot about like the prompting engineers, AI generalists. Would that be a market that this would study to, or do you still see that engineers are still sticking out here?
I think engineers are still valuable, and I think they'll be for the foreseeable future. I think that the boundaries between roles are getting fuzzier, and that was actually true before Gen AI too. So what an SDE or an SDET or QAE did 10 years ago was crisply defined, and as we evolve in the industry, like those boundaries got fuzzier. So I did a lot of production code as a tester, some devs that wrote a lot of test code. Like those boundaries started getting fuzzier and fuzzier over time. So this is just sort of a natural progression to that, where I think the important thing is to have an engineering mindset. But the thing that you do bring uniquely is you have passion and knowledge of something that not everybody does. Like when I got out of college, I didn't know how to test. I didn't want to test. I wanted to write code. That's it. And so that makes you unique and different and valuable to a team that may not have other people that have that.
We have time for just one last question.
One last one. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I won the lottery, sorry. So, how do you kind of compare it with the cost component? Doing that test with a WebDriver test is much more efficient than burning 2 rainforests to run the tests on an LLM, right? So how does this scale? Like that's,
Yeah.
how do you see it going?
So LLMs, so 2 problems. One is LLMs are expensive today. 2 is we're actually running out of GPUs. We are fighting each other to the death for GPUs. And so that makes it complicated. But 1 is they're getting faster and faster over time. Like the sort of thing that I just showed, where we're sending the LLM a full image and then it was researching and it was sending back something and we're sending another full image. Like we started this path 18 months ago and it wasn't feasible because of latency and cost. But it is today. So like that improvement made it possible that we can run this sort of thing in production for hundreds of thousands of tests. So cost is going to get better over time. We're getting more efficient models. We're caching a lot of things too. So like having those limitations forces you to be more resourceful and more frugal about how you do things. And that's good. We should as engineers. So I think I'm out of time.
Yes.
I'm going to be here all day. So, if you got more questions, find me for lunch. I'm friendly. I don't bite. And I'm always happy to talk to people. So thank you, guys.